I've been walking around these meadows for over 60 years. And it's hard to realize when you're young and without any apparent physical limitations, you just climbed all over these places. There's a ridge or a cliff here that you see that I haven't been on, been over. I came here to Yosemite in 1916, and I was 14 years old. I came in June 30th, I think it was. I'm so bad for dates. I can't remember yesterday. I can see myself with a particular camera and a particular scene, see it in great detail, and even smell the air, but I can't tell you what year it was. Everything is telescoped. Oh, I took snapshots. I remember I was a pianist. It took quite a while to really get into photography in a big way, but you can't help trying to record what you see. I'd like to look at this in the room light. Well, the first good photograph was maybe 1922, 23, maybe even a little before that. But the one serious photograph, and I really knew what I was doing, that is to sort of visualize the image, was about 1927, April 1927, this big one of the Half Dome, because of the fact that I had by that time had been doing enough thinking. It suddenly occurred to me that I can visualize the image I want, and that if I know my technique and my craft, I can operate the camera and use the right filters, exposure, and development. And out of that whole approach came the zone system in about 15 years. I see things rather individually. I don't see things differently from you do. I may respond to them differently, and it's in that response. If our eyes are normal, everything really looks the same to everyone. but that a certain thing may have a definite meaning. You would have one reaction to that fossil or to that flower, and my reaction would be different. Therefore, if we were equal in photographic craft, the pictures would have maybe the same quality, but they might have a totally different organization and message and feeling. And that's the thing about photography. It has a vast possibility. I was born in San Francisco, February the 20th, 1902. Well, I can remember as a little kid with the house out here on the sand dunes, nothing but sand and natural shrubbery, great open expanse to the gate, Golden Gate, and for miles around it was sort of wilderness. I could run down to the beach, and this early environment really, I think, shaped my life. I'm wondering often what would happen if I had been born in Detroit or Des Moines or New York, how different the whole environmental background would have been. Perhaps the most memorable single event was the 1906 earthquake. I remember it very clearly. I was 4 years old. It's no cliche now, but my nose was broken by contact with a little stone wall when I was tripped up by an aftershock that morning. And the family doctor said to my mother and father that he advised us to let me grow up, because when I mature, we can do a better job of repairing the septum, you know. And having never matured, the nose is still pointing violently to the left. My father was a very liberal man. He would take me out of school frequently. I guess the principals of the ordinary grammar schools couldn't stand me. And at the time of the San Francisco International Exposition, he took me out of school for a year and gave me a season ticket to the exposition, because that was quite an experience. In fact, I never can forget the first exhibit in San Francisco of avant-garde art that derived from the famous Armory Show, 1913. I never forget the impact these things had on me, although I certainly didn't understand what it was all about. And my grandmother spent the last years of her life trying to associate us with the presidential family with no luck. My wife, Virginia, is extremely camera shy. Well, we met in 1928. We married quite a long time, 52 years. We got 2 children, and we have 5 grandchildren. So the dynasty keeps going along, but I still can't get into the presidential family. This is probably one of the most remarkable meetings of land and ocean. I love to go out here and walk around and just look. I'll get ideas in the back of my mind for pictures, and then sometimes I'll come out and a whole avalanche of photographs takes place. Well, I'd done very little work intentionally for conservation objectives. The first photographs I did were done largely for the love of the subject and the great joy in making the pictures. And while my photographs exist in their own right, they have been of considerable use to the conservation movement. This is the northernmost part of the Big Sur coast, and now we're trying to save as much as we can of the southern part all the way down to San Luis Obispo County from overdevelopment. It's just a place with a capital P. And I consider myself very fortunate to live near it. You can see the next cove down top of the hill, a house just behind those trees. I can't verbalize on the internal meaning in pictures whatsoever. Some of my friends can at very mystical levels, but I prefer to say that if I feel something strongly, I would make a photograph that would be the equivalent of what I saw and felt. It's just interesting how you could think of a standard color photograph, an automatic camera snapshot of the blue ocean and the rocks and everything, and you'd see something superficially that would be colorful, but it might have no emotional meaning at all. It would have what we call scenery quality. And scenery quality is very different from the natural scene or from the internal scene. It's pompous to say vision, but when I'm ready to make a photograph, I think I quite obviously see in my mind's eye something that is not literally there in the true meaning of the word. I'm interested in expressing something which is built up from within rather than just extracted from without. But there I am trying to verbalize, and it never was very successful. When I began teaching photography back around 1939 or 40, I found that I had nothing to impart but the way I did something, how I exposed, how I would print. And I realized that that was very much against the approach that I had been taught in music. Well, in photography, the only way to do that was to provide a very basic craft. So Fred Archer and I developed what is called the zone system, which relates to the zones of the exposure scale of the negative. In the present scale, there's 1 to 9 zones. Then the zone O and zone 10 represent pure black and pure white. And by placing values on the exposure scale, on the desired zone, we then get the required information in the negative. I'll be back in a minute. I want to check a print in the dark room. Will that work? Print's going to Yosemite, Hasselblad outfit, everything okay. Now, yeah, that's a little better than the one I saw yesterday. Well, this is the old 810 enlarger that was designed many years ago. It's a little old-fashioned, but it works extremely well. When you have everything going, then you can step up to full enlarging value. But the beep that you hear is the electronic timer. So in black and white, all I have to do is keep counting. I never use a timer. I count like a metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. see. That's it. Well, we're going to take a print out. We're going to give it the microwave treatment just to be sure that the whites are right. And it seems sometimes like an awful waste of good paper, but you've been very much surprised if you found that the whites were drying down to a level of deadness, which would be very unpleasant in the actual print. Shall we go to the kitchen? Shall I tear it? This is a more important area. Use this because this has the greatest amount of white in it. Have to wait. The drying down of prints has always been a problem. You can make a most beautiful image and look at it in the hypo and in the wash water and you think you got it. And the next morning you look at the dried print and it's dead. And I remember the first portfolio I made over 100 prints of one subject. And every one had to be torn up because the whites just went down and out. And the print that was ideal, finally, you couldn't see the details in the little church when it was wet. But when it dried, the clapboards came in. Just about right. It goes click. This is it. This one is me. You can see the difference in quality and density. There's a little difference in color. This is why it's holding up. And you see there is still a little, can you get the slight difference between the white paper and the snow? See, this has come down just a little, which gives it body. And over here with the wet print, there isn't that amount of difference. In making the test prints, I have to go through this several times, quite a number of times. It takes quite a while to find the basic exposures so you really begin to see things. Then you get into the refinement. And once you've got it, you've got it. No, I never studied photography. I was being trained as a pianist. And I worked very hard on the piano. My father was always extremely sympathetic, wonderfully so. And if I felt photography was it, why, that was fine. But then I had to do an enormous amount of professional, commercial photography, things I didn't like to do. Let me say that is assignments from without, where the creative photographer is assignments from within.
Ansel's music making may be limited in terms of quantity. Over the years, he's obviously had other fish to fry, but his quality of sound, his sense of phrasing, I think is without peer.
And I think you have impulses that put you on one side of the fence or the other in a way, but you can easily be kept on the wrong side of the fence by lack of opportunity.
I think that the subtle and wonderful tonalities of his pictures are echoed in his music. You listen to just a few phrases, something like the Bach Arioso or a slow movement from the Moonlight Sonata, and you'll hear the zone system and everything else right there. It's a grandly eloquent expression.
You're very flattering.
No, it's just stating a fact. I have never known one artist who didn't hear you that didn't have that kind of comment.
That was pre-arthritis days.
Well, I don't know. I've heard you play since arthritis, and sure, you may put your finger in the wrong key once in a while, but the keys that you do strike are very wonderful, very, very great sounds.
I wouldn't be afraid.
What were you afraid of?
Well, because I don't think it's...
Boy, the point is, you won't play the Emperor Concerto, will you?
No.
No. Well, then why didn't you just play a melody?
I won't play 106 Beethoven.
Well, no, you better
but
not.
I might play the first 5 notes in the key of C.
Well, I would do. Why don't you play the Arioso or the first notes of the Moonlight Sonata? But they're not so demanding of arthritis.
Well, I don't know. I'm a little nervous.
Nervous?
It's the balance of control. See, I'd rather live on your reputation of me. I mean, the reputation that you have put forth verbally, than to have to blast the whole thing by a definite example.
But Ansel, if anyone is listening or looking at this and they hear your sounds, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So you ought to make a few sounds.
Oh, well.
You may even enjoy them yourself. You know, you don't play often enough nowadays, and...
we'll have to do that in a quiet moment, because now I would be scared to death.
Well, now is a natural time. That's the piano. There are the keys. Touch them.
I think you'll have to just imagine it. Think of this wonderful world that he's built up for me. I can't live up to that. I turn the pages. So... tell you about the dreams that I have. I find myself in a taxi cab all dressed up, white tie and tails, and I see placards outside, and Ansel Adams, Beethoven 4th Concerto, New York Philharmonic. And I go backstage, Carnegie Hall. I take a peek outside, and the hall is full, and there's a piano. The conductor introduces me, and I walk out. And as soon as I walk on the stage, I begin to feel the anxiety because I don't know the first note of it. I couldn't possibly play it. But I never have any anxiety about the improbability of this until I actually got on the stage. And then I'd have that horrible feeling, but I don't know this. Most of the family and the friends would make such statements as, Ansel, dear, the camera cannot express the human soul. Do not give up the music. And my rejoinder would be, well, I don't think the camera can, but maybe the photographer could try. If I see something, it is so quick, and so little thought has gone into the choice. It's just a terrific urge to do it, to visualize it, and I see the picture, which is very different from seeing the thing. Well, I was fortunately very severely trained in music. My technique was really pretty good, and my teachers transformed me from a rather hyper-activated brat into someone that had a considerable amount of discipline. And having that finally built into me, we might say, when I turned to photography, I had something to hang on to very definitely, a certain desire for precision. In fact, it's very hard for me to even think of being casual and careless. And in that way, I think the music was of enormous help. I try to make clear that the negative that we make contains the basic information needed in the fine print, and in that way is comparable to a composer's score. The print, on the other hand, becomes a performance of the score and is subject to quite a variety of interpretation, but however without really departing from the original concept. I would say that I have far more control, richness, expression, for me at least, possible in black and white than in color, because I can control color to a certain point. And after that point, it becomes very obviously unreal. Most of my pictures, people say, are rather somber, and, well, that's my style. Come on. Well, it's hard to imagine that it's something like 51 years ago that I met you over at Mabel Lujan's house. From Virginia and I were on our honeymoon.
That's true.
And we had a wonderful meeting. And with all those remarkable people that came there, I think you remain the most remarkable.
Well, I don't know about that. I wasn't considered very remarkable then. Oh, I don't think there was ever anything exotic about Ansel. He didn't have any hair on his face. He was clean cut and very thin.
No, I wasn't very exotic.
There was nothing queer about him. He just was an ordinary citizen. He didn't look
Thank you.
He didn't look like an artist. Well, I've always aimed at not looking like an artist.
Well, you can't help looking like something distinguished, artist or not, so you can't get by with it. She's the most spectacular lady in all of New York and all of New Mexico.
Oh, he was so thin that he hardly cast a shadow.
That's right.
And when we went up in the mountains, he just leaped from rock to rock like a goat. Well, I wish you'd seen him the day I introduced him to Dave. Dave and I had been somewhere and picked up Adams. I hadn't seen Adams in a long time. And he went back with me to the hotel. And I went up to get Stieglitz to bring him down. And when I came back, Ansel was putting on an act from one leg to the other and clapping at each. He was going from one side to the other clapping, and Dave looked at him as if he'd lost his mind, and I think he thought I'd lost his mind to introduce him.
And when you think of all the occasions we've celebrated together with your wonderful shows and the times of the place, and when you would come sometimes to see us, Carmel, I sort of feel that we ought to live those all over again.
I think you got up on top of your car trying to photograph the other house.
I wouldn't be surprised. I was always climbing up on cars.
I think
they don't want me to do it anymore, but...
Well, I think you've done your share of that.
Yeah, I think now I can walk around with dignified, great people and reminisce.
I think I saw you out here more than in New York.
I went there in 1933. My wife and I went primarily to meet Stieglitz and show my photographs and sort of get started in the world, you know. I'd never been east before.
Was that the first time you had gone to New York?
First time I've been to New York.
Well, isn't that amazing?
And the first person I aimed to see, we arrived in the morning, in a dismal April morning, when it was gray mist and all the garbage cans were out. And we were down at a funny little place called the Pickwick Inn, and it was raining, and I went up to see Stieglitz. I think the place was very young then. There wasn't much in it. And Stieglitz didn't look at all well. He was very tired. And he said, "What do you want?" And I explained, and he said, well, come back and see me at 2 o'clock, and he walked off. Well, my sense of chivalry, I was a little upset, so I went out and pounded up and down Madison Avenue, but I went back at 2:30.
He told you to come back and show you.
Came back at 2:30 and look at the prints, and he looked at the portfolio I had twice. He wouldn't let me say a word. The only place I had to sit was the radiator, the steam radiator. And the second time he went through the portfolio, they turned the steam on. So finally I had to stand up, and he'd wave me to sit down, but I can't sit down, it's too hot. But anyway, he was most cordial, and from that time on, we were very, very warm friends.
I knew that if he was going to put it up, they had to be pretty good, otherwise they wouldn't go up. He was pretty snooty about what he put up. I knew if he was going to put them up that it was to be done.
Well, I felt that way too, and I felt very humble about it, because that was really the...
You know, I never had one of your photographs a good one. I had some sort of, well, not very good. I had 2 or 3. I had a few photographs from different people, but I some way escaped having a good one of yours. Don't go home and give me one now, because I don't want more of anything than I have.
Well, I'm glad you told me.
Well, you gave me those pictures of myself this year.
Yeah. Well, I think you ought to have an
funny.
expressive moment.
No, I don't, because I've given up all the other photographs I had.
It's just one of those
He
things.
He started his life with the idea of being a concert pianist. Yeah. That was his original idea.
And then about 1932, between 31 and 32, after I saw Strand's negatives, that's what really did it. Paul showed me some of his negatives down there at Mabel.
Strand's work?
Yeah, he just showed me the negatives. He made that summary. Well, I don't think anybody has ever captured the real feeling of the Southwest, of this light. And
well, it gets to be a sickness once you come out here. You have to return.
I know it. I would like to come, and maybe I will. As soon as I get this year over, it's going to be a tough year.
Listen, you will not leave Carmel.
And then I'll come out here. Well, I won't stay too long, but I do want to do some things. We're going over to the little Hernandez, and I got that moonrise picture in 1941. We had worked for a long time on autumn trees and a beautiful stump up the Sharma Valley, and I didn't have any luck at all with the stump. Getting a little disgusted, and you have to admit defeat sometimes. So I said, let's go back to Santa Fe, and we started down on the old road, and I was driving along and looked up and saw this rather incredible sight of the moon, about 3 days from full, rising up over this little village with the white crosses. And I nearly ditched the car and kept yelling to all my friends to get me this and get me that, and setting up the camera and the lenses, and then I couldn't find the exposure meter. And then we went on. I was composing, and I just remembered that the moon was 250 candles per square foot. And that gave me the key to the exposure. So I made the exposure with the G filter on an 8x10 film, and I knew I had something good. I wanted to make a duplicate. I turned the film holder around, and as I pulled the slide, the light went off the crosses. And it was a very, very discouraging moment. I had just this one picture of what I knew was quite a considerable thing. The quality of the light, then it was late in the fall, the quality was extremely beautiful. And brilliant wind clouds over the mountains. The snow peaks were very brilliant. And the crosses were very brilliant. So it was just one of those incredibly fortunate accidents that do happen sometimes. And I often wonder how many pictures have been lost just because the accident happened to go the wrong way. Here we are at one of the great monuments of our primitive Western culture.
This really is motif number one as far as photography of New Mexico is concerned. Of course, the most famous photographs were taken by Paul Strand, and I think you were pretty impressed by that work.
Yes, that work, seeing those negatives, not even the prints, but seeing the negatives, that really turned me to photography.
I first met Ansel Adams in New York City in 1939 at the Museum of Modern Art. And we had an exhibition of 7 American photographers, and Ansel was one of them. And Ansel had just bought a nice brand new tripod, and he clunked along 53rd Street and across 5th Avenue with this great staff. Then at Ansel's place in Yosemite, that the whole concept of a department of photography for the Museum of Modern Art was born. I think Ansel has grown enormously over the years in a sense of scale. The mountains, although they measure the same, I guess, in your photographs, are bigger in feeling. There was at the period when I first met Ansel, we haven't really talked about this together, but there was a love for the close, for the detail, the board fence and the thistle, very extreme close-ups of flowers, the grain of wood.
Well, the group came out of the woodwork, so to speak, about 1930. Everett Weston was on the scene and others, and we formed a little group called F64. F64 is a very small stop. It was about the long focal length lens. Well, it was a symbol of sharpness. So I remember meeting Stiglitz, and he saying to me, "Oh, by the way, what is that group you had out there, California?" And I said, "Oh, F64? And he said, "Yes, that's it. Well, I'm F128. It's just a typical Stiglitzian response. He was a tough old bird until you got under the feathers.
Well,
then he was really wonderful.
But then you got together with the great scenes of nature, and you have photographed Yosemite ever since you went there as a boy. And they announced the theme already. They announced the theme of what you've developed so beautifully over the years.
Something worked out.
It sure did.
Something worked out. Yeah. Well, it's been very gratifying to me that so many wonderful things have happened.
It certainly is great to look back, isn't it, Ansel? The people, today's generation can hardly understand the real resentment that the art world had for photography. It shouldn't be around. Go away. Leave us alone.
Lloyd Rollins, you know, the young museum.
Yes, indeed.
He almost lost his job because he showed Weston, F64, and Adams. And that was too much. Then when we started the Department of Photography at the San Francisco Art Institute, there was a petition from the painters protesting the use of space in the museum for photography, which was not a form of art.
Well, we're still fighting it, but the battle is certainly the worst part of the battle is behind.
Yeah, I hope so.
No question about it.
We are accepted, even at a conceptual level. Well, let's see, I think it was 1938, and a lot of fine photographers could not possibly make a living doing creative work. I was doing a little better than most. Well, of course, we have to accept Stiglitz and Strand, who didn't have to make money. They had a little private income. And Stiglitz would make an occasional print for $1,000, but that was just a complete freak. And Strand would make an occasional print for a few hundred. The rest of the people are getting $10, $15. So prices went up from 10 to 15, finally 20, and Edward finally got to $25, and I got around 25, and then around the 60s we were up to 50 and 100. I don't know. The auctions and the dealers have just they've gone wild. It's like a real ascension in the stock market. I think one large print of the Moonrise was sold the other day for around $46,000. It's been quite exciting to have so much attention paid, a little bit worrisome. If I see something in a certain way, that's my business. The way you see it is your business, and you would not have to agree with me at all. Well, this man must know his work, so we'll do what he does. And of course, the individuality then collapses. How was this? I'm teaching piano using two pianos. The teacher's one, the students are the other, and you have a little carbon copy. The idea of this card is simply an isolation. You can hold it at a distance, have the effect of a long focal length lens. You can bring it up and get an extreme wide angle lens. You can isolate, and you can suddenly become aware of things at the corners and the edges that, because of your interest in the main subject, maybe get a little careless about. So if I stand here, I can compose, and I think it'd be good if you came right here. This will take a little time, but the rock. Want to try it? I think it's very good because I'm going to get another position, and I'll keep on yakking about what I'm doing now. I want to simplify it, and I want to exaggerate the scale of the two trees. Notice the vast difference in scale. That tree is smaller. These two are the same. But now you get a feeling of 3 dimensions, and you get clean edges. Now bring it up. You see that tree, you see that pine, you see the little black oak, and you see the bottom here. And see what difference even that will make. That's what you want. You want it from this point of view. Now you have to have the lens. Now, any questions? Am I confusing you? This is picking up the light from the whole scene. This is just diffusion. So I put this right against it. They hold the hat over the thing to take the light off the sky. 6 2/3. All right. Now I move this down and I put 6 2/3 on zone 3. And the first exposure would be a 30th of a second at 8. All right. Now we don't move anything. We set it to 30th to 32. There's no image there. There's just an all-over exposure. Now, I'm not saying you can do this perfectly every time. It's very subtle. I can do it with conventional films. I control it. And if you could hold it, well...
Gray card's very difficult, sir.
It's tricky. It can't be done, but it should be on another tripod. Never move. No shadows on it.
Do we have the previous exposure?
On purpose to reduce the cyan. And it's pictures in the White House.
Uh-oh.
This is zone 1. The aesthetic potential for this are positive. There isn't anybody who can deny that. That accomplishes its objective. What happened? He just...
Pod.
Didn't catch the pod, yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Sometimes the pod doesn't come out. Make a very good record of that. We'll send this to the Museum of Modern Art. Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. Now, do you understand what we're doing here? All of my archives and negatives are going to the University of Arizona, the Center of Creative Photography. I'm requesting one thing, that my negatives not be just put in a trunk or just looked at, but that the advanced students under proper supervision will be able to interpret, that means print, from the negatives, and can even work with the video, because I think that the next step in the art is to be electronic, and that many of the negatives taken in the past can not only be printed in a refreshing way on new materials, but also can be transferred to the video image. And of course, if I can have the privilege of interpreting Frescobaldi or Handel or Mozart or Bach on my piano, photography of the future should be able to interpret my work on his instruments or equipment. Not that I would say I necessarily would like what his interpretation was, but that really is his business. In the earlier days, it was quite a job getting here. It was a real long train trip, stage trip, and people in the East sometimes a little flabbergasted when they ask you how large the Yosemite is. You say it's nearly 1,200 square miles, and they shake their head. You mean acres? But the Yosemite National Park itself is about 1,200 square miles in area. And as I look around, I don't think I see a peak that at some time or other I haven't been on. I can remember one experience in the Tuolumne Canyon where I set up the tripod and then walked back a little bit to get a better view of the area, and a snake or something stirred the spirits of the donkeys into a frenzy, and it did a ballet on my wooden tripod, and that spirited it off into a stampede up the trail, and everything fell out of the camera cases, and I spent about 3 hours picking stuff out of the manzanita bushes. In the early days, we nearly killed ourselves because we didn't have any knowledge at all of climbing techniques, and we tie ourselves together with a piece of window sash cord and climb together. If one fell, it would undoubtedly pull the other one off. But for some reason or another, we just thought that if we were tied together, we were safe. I just can't remember too many human things, but I'm very full of the memory of the events and the weather and the wind and the quality of the area, which I think created unforgettable impressions. The scale of this area is rather overpowering in a way. It's what I'd call the earth gesture of the Sierra. And when you look down to Yosemite Valley, you can't see a single work of man. There happens to be a mountain that's a mountaineer's named after me, but in theory you can't have anything named after you unless you're thoroughly dead. So maybe by the time that I take up the final climb, why, they'll find something else. I don't like to be memorialized that way. I mean, I don't mind it. Natural conceit allows some things, but I think it's more important to be maybe remembered for work done. This is very nostalgic. This is my first trip to the valley. I was 14 years old. I remember climbing up an old rotten stump near our tent, Camp Curry, and the little box brownie number 1. And just as I was ready to make this snapshot, the trunk crumbled, and I descended rather precipitously and corkscrew manner to the ground, and on the way down, I apparently snapped the shutter. But then I made another picture and never thought about it until the man the photo finisher worked on the roll and wanted to know how I got this picture of Half Dome upside down on this roll of film. And I think he always thought for years I was just a bit nuts. But it's interesting, we have pictures from Sierra Point. The whole family was up there, all the kids, everybody you can think of. Then had an earthquake a little while ago and took out that trail. Looking back over all these years, it's easy to become sentimental. And one of the great tragedies of so many people I know is that when they reach a certain age, they decide that the work is over. But the serious artists, especially the performing artists who are very physically active, and I guess photographers are very physically active too, the interest in the life is so exciting, continuing, that old age simply isn't acceptable. And 60 years, there's very little difference. Well, of course, you change, but apparently you don't realize your change as much as you should. I suppose I'd note my own change and the ability of the weight of a camera that I carry around, plus the difference in the pictures. Pictures lately, the last 20 years, 30 years, are a little more intense than the ones done 60 years ago. I think that it's been a great experience to watch photography progress and to watch all the young people coming into the field. And I don't think I have anything to say except I would like to consider that my photography and photography in general is really just beginning. After all, photography was presented to the world in about 1839, 1840, and that's 140 years. That's not very long for an art form.
In 1938, in a letter to Ansel Adams, Alfred Stieglitz wrote, "It's good for me to know that there's an Ansel Adams loose somewhere in this world of ours.